YouTube right now. So welcome everybody who is joining us on YouTube. Again, welcome everybody who's joining us on YouTube for our Wednesday class that is now almost 10 years old, and we still have not thought of a name for it. That is going to be something we're going to work on in year 20. So just in case you're wondering, if anybody has an idea for the name of this group, year 20 is when we're going to start looking. So I'm going to now record it to, of course, Zoom, so that we have a record on the cloud if anybody wants. Happy Purim again. It was just mentioned by Larry that we had a wonderful speaker on Saturday. We were very fortunate that we had scheduled Ambassador Larry Silverman, who was retired recently and moved to the area, to speak. And then it just so happened that 2 days before, the Ukraine was attacked by Russia. So he was very kind to switch his entire talk and talk mostly about that and take questions. And so it's really appreciated. And so what we're going to do today is talk to something that is very relevant for us, obviously, because we have a holiday coming up. And so the holiday, of course, is which one? Purim. Yeah, I think it's Purim. Is it Purim or Passover or both? Could be Sukkot. Sometimes I forget. But we have Purim coming up. So what we had decided to talk about was not just about Megillat Esther, but talk about the 5 scrolls or the 5 Megillot. And we'll talk a little bit about what they are and the meaning of them. I think most of us have heard of it, but it's basically there are 5 books in the last section of the Torah, the section called Ketuvim or writings, that are called the 5 scrolls. And each one is attached to a holiday. They don't have connection in terms of the theme generally, but they are all considered the 5 scrolls. So they can be read in scroll form. Obviously, the book of Esther, Megillat Esther, is the most famous. We have one in our museum. People read from it for Purim. The others are not necessarily as important to the holiday, although they're all very important. Again, if you wanted to decide which of these 5 Megillot were essential for the holiday, Purim would be absolutely number 1, because the whole holiday is based on the scroll of Esther. That's the whole holiday. None of the other ones are based entirely on the scroll. So what are the other ones that are probably most needed? Lamentations would probably be second. Lamentations, of course, is the destruction of the first temple and kind of the view from the city itself. And it is, of course, read on Tisha B'Av, which is kind of the Memorial Day where you put all of the tragedies of Judaism together into one day, and you read from Lamentations as you sit down on the ground. We'll talk about that. The other one that's essential, but not quite as much as these two, is Ruth. Ruth, of course, if you say Ruth, you know it's associated with Shavuos. It's read. It's a story of a woman going through conversion, has nothing to do from that perspective for Shavuos, but is really become very well known in many respects because Shavuos is not as well known of a holiday. So the book of Ruth can be really something that has really upgraded it in terms of its popularity. Now, the other two, of course, are the book of Ecclesiastes, which is read during Shabbat of Sukkot, unless the Shabbat is the holiday. It is not universally read, by the way, on Sukkot. It is popular to do it, but it's not universal. The other one is Song of Songs, which is read during the Shabbat of Passover, if it's not the holiday of Passover. That as well is not universal. And we're going to talk about each of the books a little bit. Obviously, we know some about each one, but we probably know less about Song of Songs, Ecclesiastes, Lamentations, because they're not universally read for the holidays. Now, first of all, these are all 5 very short books. I believe they're the 5 shortest books in the section Ketuvim. They're not the shortest in the Bible because there's a couple prophetic books like Obadiah that are like 1 or 2 chapters, and that's it. So each of them is longer than that. Some of them are very controversial. In fact, many of them are controversial, if not all of them are controversial in one way or another. There's a lot of discussion as to how these were selected for the Bible because we don't know exactly the discussion that was going on when they chose the books of the Bible, but at least one of these was probably by far the most controversial choice for the Bible, and that would be Song of Songs. And really the only reason it got in is because it had one rabbi who really wanted it in, and at least the Talmud says it was Rabbi Akiva, although, so of course, Rabbi Akiva is a pretty well-known guy, and if he wanted it in, he probably got it in. May or not be true, because obviously it may have actually been put in the Bible before he arrived on the scene, but certainly he is the one who was counted on as the guy who got it in, because if you have read any of Song of Songs, you'll see it is a very different book. It's very more of an affair, a love affair between a man and a woman. He looked at it from a different perspective we'll talk about, and that's how he got it in. What I probably think is it was his brother-in-law's book that he wrote, and he was trying to support his brother-in-law, and that's why I got in. I don't know. That is a joke, by the way. That is not at all accurate. Nobody smiled or laughed. So all I'm going to, next thing I'm going to know is I'm going to get a call from the president of the CCAR asking, why are you teaching that Rabbi Akiva's brother-in-law wrote the book of Song of Songs? That is not at all true by any stretch of the imagination. So let's go over some of the books. We'll start off with, I think it's important, we'll go off the ones that are least well known, because, we're always, stressed for time a bit. And so I think we'll do those, and then we'll get to Ruth and Esther at the end. Obviously, Esther is pretty well known, so we'll do a little less, but we may do some more of the controversial. So let's go start with my favorite of the five, and that is Ecclesiastes. I don't know, it's also known as Kohelet in Hebrew. I think everybody's heard of Ecclesiastes. It has a very famous passage that is used in the funeral liturgy often, and of course was a very famous bird song from the 1960s, as season turn, turn, turn. And obviously I was born after the bird song became so popular, so I do not know if that section of Ecclesiastes was super popular before the song. It's a really well-known one in terms of rabbinic history, but there are others as well that are more famous from it. But the turn, turn, turn has become the most famous in our world because of the song. So it shows you how far a song can go. So what is Ecclesiastic, and why do I like him? Ecclesiastes is what I call basically me. It's a guy who is not a rabbi going around and sarcastically making comments about the world and creating discussion through these comments. It's one of the few philosophical books in the Bible. It's entirely centered on philosophy, which is pretty unheard of. It's pretty much singular in many respects in this, because philosophy is something that comes towards the end of the first millennium and a half of Judaism. So the books have already written. So it's a philosophical treatise on one question. And the question is basically, why does it matter? That's all the question is. Vanity, vanity, all is vanity. That is the most famous line, which is said, I think, more than once or several times. Vanity, vanity, all is vanity. And he goes around asking questions in a little bit of a depressed way. Some would say he's depressed. Some would say he's a realist. And the questions are basically, I live 60 years. I live as old as maybe Moses, 120 years, and then I die. Why does it matter? Why does it matter that I'm on this earth for 120 years when existence is going way before that? And very soon after I die, in terms of the cosmos, nobody will have ever met me. Nobody will know who I was except for maybe through my writings, but nobody will know me personally. Everything that I achieve will eventually matter little. We want our names, our lives to have meaning, but we're just people in an ocean. We're basically drops of water in the ocean with lots of others. And this is before the population of the world was almost 8 billion people. This is when the population of the world was probably under 1 billion. So definitely. So he goes around and asks these questions. He's almost coming from the abyss, saying, fame and glory, what does that matter? It doesn't go with me. What I have in life, what I do, doesn't matter. So it's a really depressing book in many respects, as is Lamentations, which is the other one of the, probably two of the most depressing in many ways. But yet we also know that even though they're depressing, they're going to, at the end, come up with, some ways to find meaning. So anybody have any questions about it before I go on about Ecclesiastes? Larry.
Yeah, well, obviously there's no printing press at this time. So how did he deliver this message? And he delivered it only through the Middle East, or was it widespread? Is he the guy that he just walks around like a Buddha preaching throughout the country, or the?
He doesn't walk. It's not like a prophet walking around. It's just a regular guy. I mean, it's attributed to King Solomon. So it's considered that King Solomon made up a character just to ask all these essential questions. But in truth, it's not somebody roaming around trying to gather support for his melancholy view. It's just a guy asking questions. The guy or the gal who's going around and saying, why does this matter? Why does life matter? I don't understand. And we get all in that moments. We have those moments in our life where.
But were they being preached in, let's say, temple, or what was his audience, I guess, or how did he attract an audience?
Who knows if he attracted too much of an audience? I mean, obviously, was he a kind of a preacher type person? We don't know that much about the character. Ecclesiastes is probably, is the name of him, but we don't know very much about who he was in terms of, was he based on a real character? We don't know who actually wrote the book, which, of course, if it's King Solomon, you're talking 10th century. It's probably written, I think, 600-700 years later, so it probably wasn't by him. But that's a good question. But basically, he's just asking questions and delivering monologues the whole time. I don't think there's a lot of exchanges between our thoughts about, is he walking around preaching this? Because, this is not the type of thing you preach from a biblical perspective. You don't to preach how terrible things are and how meaningless they are. So was he the guy who was standing up with the sign in the middle of the courtyard of the center of town saying, life is meaningless, why does it matter? It could have been.
Did he arrive at his own conclusion, though, as far as what he thought was the meaning of life then?
He does. And again, this is important, because if he doesn't come at the end, if Lamentations and Ecclesiastes don't have some sort of answer session at the end, they're not making it in the Bible, because they're way too depressing. And you can't be that depressing without, obviously, he is what we would call a real person. I mean, he is not a highfalutin, powerful king. He's not a prophet. He's not Daniel. He's not Ruth. He's not Esther. He's just a guy, whether he's rich or poor. He's obviously probably literate and knowledgeable, but he's the guy who is asking the question that we all ask: does life matter? We've got families, we have grandchildren, we have jobs, but in 100 years or 200 years, they're all going to be dissipated. Who knows if our job might, who knows if the job, I could have been a telephone book salesman in the 1980s. That job no longer exists. I could have had, several kids, but none of them have kids themselves. So my line doesn't continue. So these are the questions we ask. Does it matter if these things happen? And the answers, of course, are beautiful towards the end, but basically it's this dialectical wrestling on the issues of the world. And basically the conclusion is really beautiful. It's basically, it does matter if you're doing things the right way. And it's one of those books that kind of brings up the issue that money, the stuff, our power, the highfalutin jobs, the position we have in society, that is not as meaningful as we might think it is, unless we're using that for a purpose. And so the answer is basically, wisdom is what we're looking for. That is important. That's the wealth. When we talk about the wealth God has given, it's wisdom that is to be used to benefit humanity. So that's basically the answer. And it's a simple answer. And at the time this was written, probably it was a difficult time. And this is a book that can be used for difficult times, and it has been throughout the ages. When we've been in difficult moments, we looked at Ecclesiastes saying, why does it matter? We've just had the Crusades, or we're living under an evil empire, or the temple's been destroyed, or there's poverty, or there's plague. And you look at Ecclesiastes and he says, what is the meaning of life? Think of Monty Python. The meaning of life is to acquire wisdom and to use it properly. That is wealth. So in other words, wealth can be accumulated at any time by any human being, because it doesn't have anything to do with money or education. It has to do with finding wisdom and using it well. And it's a beautiful answer for a very interesting and depressing book. I think a little bit of Kurt Vonnegut when I read Ecclesiastes. If you've ever read Kurt Vonnegut, it's just coming from all directions and all these questions and different characters, and it doesn't always seem to match that meaning. But then at the end, Ecclesiastes is a little different because he comes up with the answer of answers. Karen, and you're on mute, Karen, just to let you know.
Sorry. Okay. No, I was just going to share something. When Stuart and I got married 24 years ago, 24 and a half, sorry, he'll get that. Stuart had just a year and a half earlier lost his wife to cancer, his first wife. And then, I don't know if it was 8 months later, his mother passed away. So here we are planning. We said, well, let's wait till the start of a new year. And we were trying to deal with how do we celebrate our marriage and at the same time, recognize that we've been, Stuart's side, been through these two tragedies. And so we used a quote from Ecclesiastes.
Oh, great.
As part of our wedding invitation. It was, there's a time to I was trying to find the invitation. I can't, but it's a time to live and a time to die, a time to laugh and a time to cry. And that helped us feel like we were acknowledging that we had gone through some sad things, but that also it's a time to rejoice. So.
And that's exactly beautiful. And that's basically Ecclesiastes, the answer right there.
Yeah.
It is, we have difficult moments. We teeter on the edge. And the idea is that we come out of it with this idea that God has given us the opportunity to find this wealth and meaning for our world. And this is not a one-time moment in our lives. I mean, we go back and forth. Nobody is happy and perfect all the time. And so this is one of the books of the Bible that is for humanity. It is not especially needed for educated people. It's not needed for the wealthy or high and mighty. This book can be read by anybody who has faith in God. So it's not even particularly Jewish. It is Jewish, obviously, but it could be used for anybody. And so it's really a beautiful book. It is kind of depressing to get the end. I think of anybody ever watched the show Friends?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And Phoebe was very depressed. So they told her to go watch It's a Wonderful Life. And then she came back the next day and she was even more depressed. And they're like, why are you more depressed? Didn't you like the movie? She's like, oh, it was so terrible. I stopped watching it 15 minutes before it ended. And this poor guy, his whole life, he destroys the whole town and everything goes bad. And his whole life is misery because she didn't watch the last 15 minutes. And that is Ecclesiastes. You got to watch the last 15 minutes if you want it. So that is Ecclesiastes. Again, it is read on Sukkot. A lot of people think it was, it's a high holiday theme, the idea, but it's not a grand enough book for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur because we read, already books that are not part of the Megillah those days. But it is, again, it's an answer to some difficult questions. Now, the other one that...
Question, Rabbi?
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lars.
Were all of the 5 Megillot kind of codified at the same time? In other words, was the committee that got together, the Rabbi Akibas and everybody else, did they look at everything and then close the so-called the Torah at that time? Well,
They
not the Torah,
did.
but the Bible.
They did, but there may have been different orders of the five Megillot throughout history, because we now have evidence that they weren't maybe all, because in the Talmud, they're ordered in a way that I think they're not exactly what they are today. So at times they were put together in certain orders, at times in order of the holidays, at times they were even not even together because they were spread out through the writings from what we can see from historical, but eventually they were put together for this reason. So if you read it, they're in order, and it's basically the five Megillot or the five scrolls. But no, they were not always like this.
Do any of them date back to the Dead Sea Scrolls?
Yeah, all of them do. All of them except
Dead Sea Scrolls.
All of them except for Esther. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, you actually have a piece of every book of the Bible except for Esther for the Dead Sea Scrolls. So all of these are represented. And
why is Esther the only one that's in a Torah scroll? I often wondered that.
All five of these are. All five are.
All five are. Oh,
all five. That's why they're called. However, it's not as popular to use them in that form. I mean, Esther is the major one used on scroll. The other four also read on scrolls, but not even everybody reads them. I mean, Lamentations and Ruth are almost universally read, especially Lamentations. But the scroll thing has become iconic with the book of Esther, but they're all supposed to be on Megillot. They're all the five. That's why they're called the five scrolls, or Megillot is basically scroll. So, or Megillah singular. So they're all like that. It's just we don't see them because it's not popular and we don't have copies of them. However, we will be raising money from this group to buy the four other scrolls, and we'll be talking about that very soon. It won't be the original ones. It's going to be the little children's one you get from the store. It's going to be like $1 each. So what we'll do now is let's go through a couple of the others. Let's go through again the ones that are not as well known, and then if we have time, we can go through them more. So Lamentations is another of the very depressing books. It is beautifully written. My Hebrew is not good enough to tell the beauty of the language. But Lamentations many consider to be one of the best written in terms of the language, the most beautifully written. Of course, it is read on Tisha B'Av. It is the centerpiece along with some of these other later poems that are read. So basically, Tisha B'Av again is the 9th of Av. It's the day. It's the only other full fast day, but it is not a non-work day. It memorializes the destruction of the two temples and other things that have happened. So you sit on the ground. You don't wear, as on high holidays, you don't wear leather, and you read the book of Lamentations. And what is Lamentations? Now, Lamentations in other places is used in different ways. From Jewish perspective, it is basically a lament by a city. So the author is Jerusalem. So that is how we generally read it. And it's a city who has just been destroyed and taken by an enemy. And the perspective of the city is, I've seen all these terrible things. Where are we going from here? And of course, at the end, it gets much more positive. But it's about the city talking about the tragedy going around it. And we could talk about this from any perspective of any big city or small city that has been destroyed by some means. It could be a hurricane, it could be flood, but often, of course, it is war. And so Lamentation speaks about the tragedy, now Lamentation and Tisha B'Av, of the destruction of the first temple in 586. It is attributed to Jeremiah. Now, Jeremiah, of course, lived during this tragedy and afterwards, and that's why it's so easy to connect him. Some may even think it was Baruch who wrote it, some think Baruch, who was one of his supporters, wrote both books. but it is a terribly beautiful book that, again, is very similar to Ecclesiastes in that it's all about questions. Lamentation comes from a similar perspective, except for something terrible has happened. When Ecclesiastes, it's just a regular guy living a regular life talking about why does it matter, where Lamentations is about a seminal, tragic moment in the city where the temple that had been there for hundreds and hundreds of years, all attackers miraculously in some cases, and this is not just biblical history, this is actual history, were sent away. At times it seemed like for sure it was going to be taken, and then it wasn't. And of course, it was very easy to say it is God protecting the city because great empires, especially like the Assyrians, that had no reason they shouldn't take it, weren't able to take it. And time and again, it had survived. But now, because of a poor choice made by a king, it is taken by the Babylonians. What's the poor choice? The king chose to side with Egypt, despite the warnings of Jeremiah. He supported Egypt, and of course, Babylon was not happy, and the king thought Egypt would come to the protection of Jerusalem, which we all know is a ridiculous thought on his part, and it's taken by the Babylonians. So this is in the moment. We have just been destroyed. How can it be that this city was full of people and now it is destroyed? Now that is not the most important part of this. The suffering it speaks about, the suffering of the people and the destruction of the city, and of course the temple and the shock and the babies and the adults who are killed. But there is a singular important part of this book that is a defining moment in Jewish history in many respects, and it has to do with God. Now, in most cases in ancient society, if you were taken over, you just took on the gods that had beat your God. Marduk, the Babylonian god, has defeated our God. We are taken to Babylon. We will start to pray to Marduk. He's strong, and not only stronger, he beat our God on our God's home court advantage, which is very hard to do in the world of gods. But Lamentations does not take it that way. Lamentations is very specific on whose fault is it that Jerusalem is destroyed. The answer is, it's our fault. It is our fault. It's not that Babylonians were stronger or that our God was defeated. It is our fault because we didn't do what we were supposed to do. We weren't acting courageously. We weren't following God's laws. We were supporting the Babylonians when we should have not been, trying to increase our holdings. So the reason we are punished is disloyalty to God, not disloyalty to the Babylonians. And that is a very important piece because that, that keeps us going. When we don't think their God defeated our God, it's just our God got frustrated with us and let them win. That is kind of the onus is on us. It's not our army. It's our responsibility to be better. And we take this into Babylon. And when the Persians take over and defeat the Babylonians and say you can go back, they look at the Jewish community, they're still Jewish 50 years later. 50 years later, the Persians will defeat the Babylonians and we're still Jewish. Lamentations, if it was written that, or the belief found in Lamentations, is the main reason we stay Jewish, because we continue to believe in God and continue to believe that it was our fault that this happened. And as we read in Jeremiah, we're going to be able to then fix it because the onus is with us. What do we have to do to fix the problem? We have to be better. Yeah, we got to be better. We got to follow God, follow laws, be better human beings, treat people with respect and dignity, and that's going to make it. And we will eventually be able to fix this problem. Any thoughts? I want to make sure people Karen, and then Larry, and then Flossie.
Well, as I'm listening to this, I'm thinking of what happened during the Holocaust. How did we deal with that?
There we go. Same thing. Lamentations.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what if it were written in the 1940s?
And that is a very good question. Larry.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to bring up about the spirit of the people and how important that is. And, in context of today with Ukraine, and things, it just reminds me. And I was thinking about Verdi's opera Nabucco and that chorus that he has in Nabucco, which is the wailing of the Jewish people in Babylon, and, how it inspired almost for the unification of Italy at the time. Italy wasn't even a country until the 1860s or 1870s or things of that nature. And, this predated it in trying to unify the country among all the different states there, and how the wailing of the people, in that marvelous chorus, if you haven't heard it, it was in a very early opera by Giuseppe Verdi, who later became probably the most prominent opera composer of all time. But it's just magnificent of how it, the whole story is permeated other civilizations and things.
And I saw that opera live in Rome. And I think, Karen, you bring up both a good question. Karen brings up a question that can, unfortunately, an issue that can be weaponized. When it comes to the Holocaust, you have groups of Jews who say it was our fault, but not our fault. It was specifically certain Jews' fault. It wasn't us. It was you guys over there. So we were, doing what we're supposed to, and you weren't, and that's why this happened. And so there's a balance between taking the blame, but also pointing the finger at others. Flossie.
When we say Tisha B'Av, were both temples destroyed the same day?
That is what Judaism says, probably not realistically. But remember, the calendars also from one to the next are very different, because we end up with the Babylonian calendar, which is a different calendar. So the same general time in the summer, maybe, but no, it wasn't. But they were put there. Jewish tradition says yes, more likely no.
How many years difference between the first synagogue and the second?
It was about 650 years.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah, more.
Okay.
Yeah, so the first one is 586,
And the second
587
one,
BCE. The second is 70 CE.
7.
Larry, I'm going to go to Michael first, then go to Larry, since Michael didn't get to.
You said something that I never really thought about, is the calendars. I never thought that the calendars had not, changed, that the calendars had changed, and how we line up the calendar for the harvest and season, so that it follows the biblical story. When did we come up with the calendar that the lunar calendar? When did we start that?
That's a really good question. We know we had a lunar calendar going way back. So they were using some sort of lunar calendar very early on, probably after leaving Egypt even, because if you're going to go to farming land, you have to have some sort of calendar. It's necessary. However, the calendar we have now is and I'm not a mathematician, I'm not an astronomer, but I'm told the calendar, the Hebrew calendar we have now is very impressive. It is, let's put it this way, the Hebrew calendar is more accurate than the solar calendar in long term. Like in 10,000 years, we're going to have to make adjustments to the Gregorian calendar. It's January 4th. Well, it's got to go back and be, November 8th. But the Hebrew calendar, you will not need to make any adjustments. It is so accurate in the long term. That is because we didn't make it. The Hebrew calendar is a copy of the Babylonian calendar. So the Babylonians are the ones who figured it out, and we took it from them. And so we don't even have a record of when we started using it. The Persians were also a very intellectual society, as were the Greeks, so it may have been refined through those years. but there are several months on the Jewish calendar named after Babylonian gods. So that tells you we didn't make it.
Well, that kind of begs a follow-up question is, why do the Orthodox and conservative celebrate the extra days of holidays and Yom Tov, and the story, we all know the story is that they didn't know when the moon was,
right,
to take a chance and all that stuff. But if it was so scientific, how did this skepticism arise?
Well, the skepticism is actually very valid. It is very accurate, but not accurate to the second. So the horn blows and you may not hear the blowing, and you may miss a minute of the holiday or a second of the holiday, which is considered too much. It has to do with when is sundown and the 3 stars. So that we need, modern technology can now do it, but they didn't have the up to the second or minute. So there was a fear you would miss a minute of the holiday, which is important. So that's why the extra day was added. But today the extra day is obviously not needed with our technology, but people still want to keep it for tradition. Karen. Oh, sorry, it was Larry, then Karen. Oh, go ahead, Karen. Sorry.
Me? Okay. Larry or me? Which one?
Oh, Karen, go right ahead. Yeah.
All right. So
Go ahead.
the Babylonian calendar, I never knew that. What is it now? 5782? Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. What does it go back? I was in my mind thought it was Adam and Eve, or I really don't remember why.
Right now, let me explain. The year 5782 is ours. We did that. That part we did, and we didn't. It's not a copy. The Babylonians were not using the calendar. The method of the year, the 1 year with the added month 7 times in 19 years, that was created by the Babylonians.
Okay.
We go back. Basically, God created the world in 7 days. Day 8 is day 1. So that's how we go back. We basically going back through the Torah where Solomon says, well, in the book of Solomon, 60 years ago, this happened. And then they go to the book of Kings and they just keep going backwards. And then obviously in Genesis, you have the dates. Adam was born, and then so many years he lived, and he gave somebody birth at this age. So that's where they just go backwards. So think of day 8 in the world, the creation of the world. Larry.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back for a minute to this question of responsibility, because that's always a question that I think haunts everybody in every religion. Like, where is God, during times of trouble and war and all of those things. And I may have mentioned it, or we may have talked about it one time, but I think there was a play that was performed, supposedly fictitious, but they thought during the Holocaust, they had these people that were in concentration camp that had performed the play, and they asked that very question, putting God on trial. Where are you? Why aren't you speaking out? Obviously there were 2 points of view. They almost do it like a jury trial. You may be more familiar with it. I think it was a Canadian production that may be available that we could watch one time, but I thought it was really, really interesting to hear the points of view of whoever was that wrote the play based on these questions that were raised.
We could look at that. I would imagine it might be based on the book by Elie Wiesel, I think titled The Trial of God, but I don't know. I don't know about this Canadian production, so we can look it up. That'd be really interesting. I've heard of other productions about it, but not something so famous.
But I think that is a question that continues to haunt, this question of responsibility, whether you agree with the book of Lamentations or not, as far as, because God has intervened in previous situations to, notably the Exodus or whatever, whenever you want to consider the miracles, and he's not going to, but where was he is something that haunts us all the time.
Yeah, because in the book itself, it seems at times that God is being passive and letting it happen. And at times it seems like God is even being more active and assisting. One of the more difficult questions, and again, the whole book is difficult as it is its comparison to Sodom and Gomorrah, where the entire city was destroyed. The difference being, and Book of Lamentation does does point to this, is that in Jerusalem, it's not everybody who's sinning. Whereas in Sodom and Gomorrah, it was everybody except for maybe 9 people. And Judaism says not even 1. So there are really good people doing what they're supposed to do. There are children doing what they're supposed to. There are adults. So it is not the destruction of people who are universally misbehaving. It's the destruction of everybody because a lot of people were misbehaving. And that's a very different question. So, and that's what this brings up. Obviously, it comes to the idea that if you that faith in God means eventually things will turn out all right, as is even more stressed in Jeremiah. Now, obviously, Jeremiah, and this may have been written after, the Persians had taken over the Babylonians and said, you can go back. It's easier to write a book about we're going to be invited to go back when you already know you're going to be invited to go back. Although Lamentations doesn't go that far, but in connection with Jeremiah, it does. So it's again, these are not easy books. The Bible for us is not an easy set of books to read and have fun with, because they ask the larger question. A rebellion by the people against God means bad things are going to happen. You don't know exactly what it's going to be, but you're not acting well in terms of behavior, but then you're making stupid political decisions, like siding with siding with the side that is really going to probably lose. And it's not that hard to see that that's going to happen. So you're allowing inept leadership to cloud your viewpoint in an attempt to better yourselves. You sided with Egypt, who, of course, you may not know this, but Israel hasn't always had a good relationship going way back. You may have heard of that. I don't know. But the whole irony of siding with Egypt is not missed by rabbis and sages or even regular folk like us, because we know Israel, we were slaves in Egypt. Israel was sacked by Egypt in the 10th century. Egypt had been a bully to Israel for a very long time. So this is one of those strange things that happens. So I want to make sure to get to the one more, because we obviously Ruth and Esther are pretty well known, but I want to just talk a little bit about Song of Songs, Shir HaShirim. I'm sure many of you have heard of the book. Obviously, the most famous part of the book is Ani L'Dodi V'Dodi Li, I am to my beloved as beloved to me, which is basically the theme of the Jewish wedding. No small connection, because it is about love and that kind of stuff. So this is the book I told you that was, according to the Talmud, was put in because of Rabbi Akiva. This is the book, when you read the book, this is the one book you come out asking, why is this book in there? Why? It's about a loving relationship between a man and a woman. It is very sensual. There is a lot of sensual moments in this book. The whole book is filled with them. And the reason, according to Talmud, it got in is because Rabbi Akiva said it is an allegory. It's really the people of Israel and God, the loving relationship we have, sensual marriage, the whole connection we have. We must be so in love with God, and God is likewise so in love with us. So that is how he got it in accordingly. And it does seem pretty probable that that was the way, because really it is a very fierce love story between this man and the woman. And it's all about praising each other and stories of love. And it gets a little bit in depth in some places, much more so than many of us are comfortable with in the Bible. It's attributed to King Solomon, as so many other books are, but obviously it was written much later. This one is probably 4th century at the earliest, or some people think even earlier, but probably 4th century. So the idea that Song of Songs, actually some think it goes all the way to the 6th century, is read on Passover. So a very important holiday, to say the least. And so we have this book that is about love. and it's about binding relations. And Rabbi Akiva thought it's about our love for God. But sages through the years have also taught us that it's an important book because it's about our responsibility and the love we show for our spouse. Or that's what it's about. If you don't take it as an allegory, it's about being respectful, but being in love, showing affection, not forgetting after a long time that the affection is essential. I am my beloved's and my beloved is mine. The words that on the wedding day are not just for the wedding day. It's about praising your loved one. Arise, my darling, my perfect one, come away with me. It's about all of these beautiful remarks. I'm not going to get into the more detailed ones, but I am lovesick. It's also about having children, because it's mentioned that you're supposed to have children if you can. So it's a love poem that somehow got in and then got connected with Passover, although it's not universally read on Passover, but it is connected to the holiday. And so if you read it, it's one of those things that people say you should read to your spouse. I was reading an article. One of the things you must do in your life is read Song of Songs to your spouse while in bed, lying next to each other. So that's a beautiful thing, according to many. So as you can imagine, sitting next to your spouse in a loving embrace as you read the book of Lamentations is not what you're going to do, or Ecclesiastes, or any other book for the most part, because it's all about the struggles of life and the difficult issues. Am I going to sit there with my wife talking to her like I'm Ecclesiastes, saying, why are we even married? Why do we have children? It doesn't matter. We're going to die and nobody will remember us, because everybody who would have remembered us is going to die also. So this book is a very different book. You can only imagine the rabbi sitting there. The rabbis have got together. They've got the books. Somehow somebody picks up and says Song of Songs and just throws it to the side, not even bringing it up. And then Rabbi Akiva just happens to be in the room, one of the most. He will become the most impressive, but probably very impressive at the time, and says, hold it. That is my favorite book. I really like it. I say we put it in. What do you guys think? And then the discussion is then entered. The vote comes. It's 1 against 50, and it gets in because the one is Rabbi Akiva. So that you can see, but who knows that, traditionally, when you think about the books of the Bible, it's a discussion, and then each book is voted on, and each one that gets in is unanimous. That's kind of the tradition. Does that happen? Who knows? Karen.
I didn't want to interrupt you, but I don't know if anyone else has been there. Stuart and I were in Nice, France last summer, and there's a wonderful Marc Chagall Museum. In Nice. And what's really wonderful about it is that it's only 17 paintings, but they're all very large scale, and they're all from the Bible. And most of them are from Genesis and Exodus, but there are at least 4, maybe more, large scale paintings of Song of Songs. And I actually pulled them up. So if you want to see them,
that'd be great. Yeah.
I can share them if you can make me co-host.
Sure.
Share my screen and show you.
That's
they're
perfect.
amazing. And just let you see how Chagall, it's a marvelous museum. And as I say, they're
So, and again, his paintings of Song of Songs are some of his most famous ones, outside, of course, the ones in Israel.
well, hold on a second. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, I just want to give you can you all see that? The 2 paintings?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Can you make it bigger?
Let's see. I can zoom in a little. Sure. Let's see. Yes, but I have individual shots, so I'll show you those in a second.
Oh, okay, great.
I just wanted you to get a sense of, these are all very large works. I mean, so you can see the room. Let me see if I can, hang on a second. I don't know if I can scroll or hang on.
You probably just click on it twice or put.
Yeah, no, can you see that one now?
We can see it, but it's really tiny.
Oh, all right. So
we can only see the thumbprints, Karen.
the thumbprints?
Yeah,
Oh.
that's all we see.
It's like this.
Oh, all right, hold on. Let's see.
Just click on, if you go maybe right click or just click on it twice.
Well, no, I'm open, but if you can't,
There you
do you
go.
see the one of like a bride and groom?
They're really
Only
tiny.
thumbprints.
Only in thumbprints. Okay, hold on. Let me figure out. Hang on. Let me stop the share and then I'll reshare. All right, let me open it
I
again.
think you were sharing the wrong screen.
Maybe so. Hang
Well,
on.
while we're here, Karen will be starting her course tonight. Oh, there
There
we
we
go.
go.
Now I
There
can
you
see
go.
them. All right.
That's beautiful.
There's that one. Let's see if I can get to another one. That may, I think that one's actually part of one of the paintings. Hang on a second. Let me try. Oops.
Does each have a title, Karen, that goes back
Yes.
to the Song of Songs?
Well, I'm
Or
not
are
sure
there
about
different-
song. I'm not sure. Hang on a second. Let me go back to.
You said there were 17?
Well, they're not all Song of Songs. I think the 17, the
Oh,
total is 17. I think maybe 4 of them are from Song of Songs and the rest are Genesis and Exodus. Maybe I can put them into something and send them all to you. Right now, I'm trying to get to, let's see, share screen.
Each did have some sort of at least a descriptive title, Larry.
Yeah. Can you see that one?
Mhm.
Does that come up? Did it come up?
No, it's
No,
still
you're
just,
back on.
No, the thumbprints, they're
Back
very
on the
small.
thumbnails.
All right, hold on.
You need to open them.
Yeah,
Oh,
no, I am, but it's not. All right, let me stop the share and then reshare it. Hold on. Sorry.
Oh,
Stuart's coming in to help me, but I've got it. That's the, can you see it now?
now we can see it.
The
Yeah.
bride and groom, I
Yes.
got it. I have to stop and start again. But that's one of, I think one of the 4. Just gives you an idea how he interpreted, but if you
Never
look
seen it before.
closely, it's amazing, isn't it?
Never seen that before.
Yeah, well,
And-
that museum blew us away.
Is this the original?
Yes.
This is a photograph of the original. I took these
No,
photographs.
I mean like the ones they have in the museum and stuff. They're
Oh,
all.
yeah.
Yes.
In fact, some of them were, that he opened that museum. It was.
Oh,
open.
okay, great.
Yeah, so these were painted specifically for the museum. Or the other way around, the museum was open because he had this collection of biblical paintings.
And
But
they're really the only items in the museum. There are a
Yeah.
few other things inside rooms, but essentially it's one enormous display of the 17 pieces,
right.
large, pretty much in order.
Hmm.
So you walk around the room and you're walking through Torah,
You know what
you're
I
walking through Tanakh in a sense.
what I can do, not now, and it'll take too long, but I could put all of them into a PowerPoint thing and then share them all with you guys.
That'd be great.
Yeah, it's
If you have the
next
titles
time.
or the information on them.
Yeah, I do. I have
Look
all
at
that.
stuff.
So if you want, I can do it next time. Just get them to where you can see them one after another.
Karen, this is the Nice Museum?
It's called the Chagall Museum. It's in Nice, France. Yep.
Okay.
It was just a beautiful, what did we spend, Stuart? A couple of hours at least.
Mhm.
You
Yeah,
know,
we did
Eileen and I were there 40 years ago, shortly after it opened, 42 years ago, shortly after it opened. And until you mentioned it, I had absolutely no memory of it.
Oh,
Hmm.
wow.
I need to look at some pictures.
I wonder if it was. I wonder if it was.
I wonder if it
when
was open then.
Yeah.
I wonder if
No,
these were
73, I
painted.
just looked it up. I just
It
looked
Might
it
not
up.
have even been painted.
Was he alive when they opened it?
No,
Yes.
no, it was
Oh, he opened it.
1973.
Oh, so he was. Okay.
He actually
He
was.
did
there
many
for all of
paintings,
the-
didn't he? He
Sorry.
did many other paintings of the Bible, the stories of the
Oh, yeah.
Bible. He
Yeah.
did a whole series of, from Genesis all the way through Exodus, I believe.
But this
I
I don't know
museum,
where they are, they're probably in different museums throughout the world.
well, he
Yeah,
was,
we have a print of one of them. No, I think ours is at the wall.
he was living in the south of France in Aix, the town of Aix, I forget, Aix-la-Ville or something. And it's like, what, 10 minutes from Nice, 15 minutes from Nice. So he literally oversaw the building of the museum, the whole, the installation. So it's an amazing place. You remember it, Michael?
Oh, is? Gosh, I
No,
remember
it's
that
just-
so well because
Yeah.
the Corniche, you
Oh,
drive
yeah,
up
yeah, yeah,
and it's
yeah.
just.
Well, if I ever get there, I'll definitely go.
Just-
I
Put it on
remember
your list,
these.
but that was, we did actually just quick, the hop on, hop off bus for the day from Nice and Villefranche. And that was one of the 17, I don't know how many stops, whatever it was. The Chagall Museum was one of the stops.
You know, beyond Jewish themes, that whole Côte d'Azur area has a series of really incredible art museums because
Yes.
several of
Yeah.
the artists
Yeah.
Painted there. Picasso, there's a great Picasso museum somewhere along the coast. I don't know.
Antibes, it's in Antibes.
Okay.
I don't want to
that's
make this about art, French art, but I just
No,
thought.
we're finished the class.
Oh,
So
okay.
before we conclude, Karen will be, of course, teaching her 4-part series starting tonight at 7 p.m. Also, so good luck, and I hope everything goes smoothly. I know it will.
Well,
Larry?
Yeah, before we leave the Megillah, just one question on Esther, and maybe you can answer this next week or another time. We had talked about the Apocrypha and the part of the Apocrypha that has Esther in it, and I started reading it, and I basically didn't get up to I guess you said it was Mordecai's dream or something?
Yeah, it's a dream by Mordecai.
Could you, when you get a chance, doesn't have to be today, could we talk a little about that? What is in that, and why do you think that was included?
Yeah, we definitely can.
In the Bible portion, but in the Apocrypha portion?
Right. Well, it's one, did they see it? Number 2, was it a later edition? But we can talk about that definitely. We are supposed to talk next week about a different topic. We're going to talk about the Shanghai Jews. But if you want, we can talk about the book of Esther and the book of Ruth, and finish this and move the other stuff. Move Shanghai Jews 1 week back if you want.
Right. That makes sense.
That's everybody. So we'll talk about the book.
yeah.
I didn't know how much time it was going to be for these, so I always like to have more information than needed. So we'll
I
do.
did want to send out the Netflix, the name of the documentary on Netflix about the Shanghai Jew for people to watch.
Yes, would you send that? We'll send it out.
Yeah, I'll try
You can
and
send it out now. I mean, you can send it out now, but we're not going to talk
I
about
got to look it up
until
and see what the
16th.
name of it was. It had a real catchy title, and it's a very excellent documentary.
Was
Yeah, because
was that a World War II documentary?
sorry, say again?
About the Jews who fled and stayed in Shanghai?
Yeah.
This was prior to World War II.
Oh,
It was
'cause there's
in
a World War II
Oh, this
documentary
is about the old Shanghai Jewish community. I thought it was about the new one as well. Well, that'll be interesting. Yeah. But we'll do that in 2 weeks. So next week, we're going to talk about the book of Esther and the book of Ruth. And again,
Great.
each one, we get to talk a long time about each individually. So we'll see how that goes. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Any other notes, Karen?
I just wonder, as I'm thinking about just this, maybe we should do a session on Jewish painters like Marc Chagall and
That's a great
how they
idea.
express.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Chagall's life is so interesting. He actually was about the same age as my maternal grandfather, and they were from the same city in what is now Belarus, Vitebsk. And so I fell in love with Chagall as a kid because so many of his paintings are set in Vitebsk, and I always kind of connected to it. But Chaim
Great one.
Soutine is another one.
Well, I think we can do Jewish painters, and I'll put that down after Jewish View of Animals.
Who am I leaving
That's a
out?
great idea.
I'd have to think.
We can talk a little bit about why there's so few famous Jewish painters for a very long time, because it just, for several reasons, as we know, we'll talk about the reasons both outside and inside the religion. So we really don't have famous Jewish painters until the 19th century. And there's not, and even there is a lot of famous Jewish painters, but we are not represented in this type of artwork like we are represented in so many other things, music, science, so and why that is.
Utrillo, not Utrillo. Who's the other one? Stewart.
Pissarro.
Pissarro is Jewish.
Yeah, I mean, there's some. I mean, don't.
And who else did we see in France?
Starting with the Impressionists, I think.
Right, and again, that's also the
better
19th
represented
century.
than most people realize, I think.
But that's also the 19th century.
Starting then, yes, starting with the
That's when. So a little bit earlier, but the impression is that I'm not, an art historian by any stretch, and I can invite an art historian to do that. I know one in our congregation, but I think it's a great idea. Let's do it.
Philip Rothko, who is a modern painter, and there was a play just recently out, I think, called Reds, but he basically said that after the Holocaust, art is basically dead. We can't paint representational art anymore, and he started painting these basic squares. They almost look like, and there were several modern artists that are, Jewish, but they've gone totally away from any of the representational art of things. The other interesting thing is why so many non-Jewish artists painted Jewish scenes. I mean, you see them all over the Vatican, the Old Testament scenes, and the Sistine Chapel, of course, but others, the Rembrandt's, paintings of Jews.
Yeah, Rembrandt would be the most famous.
The subject of artists throughout the world. The Old Testament.
And it's an interesting note when you are in the Vatican, in case you're there, that if you pick up a painting and try and walk away, they get really upset about that, just to let you know. So don't do that.
I'm just going to mention something else. I was thinking about Chagall. A couple of years ago, like 3-4 years ago, Stuart and I saw a play as part of Spoleto called The Flying Lovers of Vitebsk. And it was about Chagall and his first wife, who died very young. Can't even think of her name. But it was fascinating, and really talking about his start in Paris. And
we could do one session on artists and one session on Chagall, who's
he's just
probably the most famous Jewish artist, although there's a couple others that are probably in non-Jewish circles are considered even more important. But for us who are not art historians, he's probably the most famous.
Yeah, so that's okay.
Those are great ideas. No, I think it's we got the next ones we have are Esther and Ruth. Then we're going to do the Shanghai Jews. Then I got to put that down because we're going to do the Shanghai Jews before World War II. I just wrote it down because that's a whole different group.
Yeah.
And then we were going to do Jewish view of animals, and then we were going to do Jewish painters. That's what I have through March.
Okay.
I think maybe in April we could consider starting to get together again in person.
I think so.
In a backyard or someplace.
And I forgot to call Eve, and I'll give her a call to go over that. But I think April, we just changed our mask policy at the synagogue as well. So we're starting, you still, when you're sitting down, I think you can take it off in pews. So we're starting, and that's because the CDC, the schools, everybody has, so we're going by whatever all the doctors say. So
when is the new singer coming to the
she's going to start in April. So if you want to see her in a different light, she is the starring in Mamma Mia at the Savannah Theater.
Really? Oh.
Yeah. And so you'll see her sing that. However, if you have any of you remember High Holidays where we had the woman sing Kaddish in a special way, Chetzi Kaddish. So if you go to the High Holidays, we had this beautifully sung Chetzi Kaddish in an operatic tone, and that is her as well. So she can do Mamma Mia or opera. So we're very fortunate. Hopefully it'll work out. She's a sweetheart too, and she moved to the area, and she's Jewish, so we'll have her on the Bima with us. She's going to sing a cappella until we can find. We got to find a organist. So we have several. It probably won't be too hard. We got to find a good one because it's a lot harder if you're at church on Sunday, but if you're sitting on Saturday, it's not quite as difficult to find somebody. So we have, I think, 2 or 3 we're looking at.
Great.
All right. So hopefully I may even go to Mamma Mia now if the things keep going down. So if my wife let me go, because I can make it an official. Well, honey, I got to go on for work.
Yes.
See Mamma Mia just to make sure she's good at singing. Well, thanks, guys. You guys have a good one. Anything else you need? Also, we do have 2 Purim things coming up. One will be live. That'll be on Sunday the 13th. That's where we're going to do the spiel and have the Lamentations. We're going to do it outside because of the little kids. There's still some, a little discomfort with kids who can't be vaccinated going indoor stuff. So that'll be for adults and kids. We'll have the Hamantash, we'll have the spiel. If any of you want to act, I lost 4 of my actors. I had 8 actors. I lost 4. So I'm now down to 4, and I'm trying to desperately find the other 4. I have a song leader who's going to sing the songs, and we'll have pizza. Then on Passover, Erev Passover, we're going to have a really interesting program as we're working with 6 other synagogues, and we're doing a Purim Megillah reading on March 16th at 7:30. It'll be on probably our Zoom and YouTube. I'm actually going to be the one putting it out there, but I'm not the one in charge of it. So it's going to be different rabbis from around the country doing 10 to 15 minute lessons. and then different people reading them, singing the Megillah. So
Wow.
that should be nice.
When
We're
are you
doing.
having- Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to add, we're not having a live Megillah reading that night because it is St. Patrick's Day the next day. So the whole place is boarded up. You can't park downtown. And so we could have gone to another place, but we just decided, since this opportunity came up weeks ago before we knew the pandemic was going to slow down, I said, that's a great idea. So that's why. So it should be pretty interesting.
When are you
I'm
having the kiddush that you mentioned with the kosher corned beef and pastrami?
That has not been set yet. I'll talk to Jonathan. They're bringing it from, I don't know if it's going to be kosher though. It's from Katz.
Okay.
I think he's bringing it from Katz.
Katz is not kosher.
Yeah, Katz is not kosher. Second Avenue is kosher, but I think he's getting it from Katz.
I didn't know you could get corned beef from a cat.
Huh?
I
Yeah,
didn't know you could get corned beef from a cat. I thought it was
Yes,
only
you
from
can.
cats.
This particular Katz you can. It's a rare breed.
Oh, okay.
Karen.
You said you needed actors.
Yeah, are you interested?
Do they, well, wait, the question is, do they have to memorize the script or?
No, the script is there.
I mean, they can read the script.
They're reading the script. We're just going to practice that morning before. This is not a major production. Some years we do a lot of practices. This year we get there, you get there earlier. We practice once or twice. If you want, there's songs that you can sing, but if you don't want to sing the song, we have a professional song leader who's going to sing it.
Stuart might be interested. I would be interested if I.
Well, we could
13?
basically, we have every part open because we have 4 people, but we haven't set, I've tentatively set where everybody's going, but we can move it because there's a couple people, there's one person who's always Haman, and he was one of the ones who couldn't. So if you want to be Vashti or Esther or a narrator, or Stuart wants to be Vashti or Esther.
I would, I'll check my calendar and I'll send you. a note.
And it's a Harry Potter theme. I can send you both the scripts.
Harry
You
Potter.
didn't see me do Julia Child, did you?
I did not.
Yeah, we've both been, Stuart more so than I, have been in a number of productions with Sun City Community Theater.
Yeah, so those are more, this is just a light one. Some
Okay.
years we're, obviously we didn't know about the pandemic, if we were going to do it. It's going to be outside probably, so you'll have to speak loud, but we're going to do our best. It'll be a small, if you want to be in next year will be much more professionalized. We're going to go back to what we did previously, which was a little bit more in the sanctuary with the sound system and doing it a lot better. We had some professional actors that have done it before. Jonathan Rabb's done it. We had another even more, a pretty well-known actor do it as well. Marianne and Michael Hofstein, who were both in Hollywood. She was a famous stunt woman. He was a famous TV director and cameraman. They did it. They were 2 who just canceled on me as well. So
This is outside, you say? You're doing
I
it
think we're going to
outside?
make it outside just for this year. We're going to see how
In the park there?
it's either going to be in the park or on the street. We're going to block off the street. We haven't got they weren't giving the zoning things to block off streets, but I think they are now. So we're either going to be in the park or in the street just for so little kids can come.
Oh, okay.
Sunday, the 13th, right?
Sunday 13th. Yeah, and then we'll probably have a small showing. It's the first in-person thing we're doing like this in a while. So, but we're going to still do it.
We're still recording, aren't we?
Oh yeah, everybody out there, come. You're all welcome. We're going to have Hamantaschens, pizza. We're thinking of getting maybe a ice cream truck. We'll see now that we know what's going on. Our policies keep changing for COVID. They have not changed where we're inviting little kids to do things in the building yet, because not all parents, including me, feel 100% comfortable with that. So
Some announcement. Could you make again about the Monticello, the film? And
yeah, the film for the Monticellos of this month is our first month in almost 2 years where we're going to have a full slate of events. And it's still not what we used as much as we used to do, but it's a lot more. So we're going to have an incredible movie, 2:00 this Sunday, the Levies, or they're actually Levies of Monticello. It's about the family of Admiral Levy, who was the highest ranking Jew in the military for a good portion of the 19th century, served in the War of 1812. He actually served at the beginning of the Civil War, which is 50 years later. And he's the one who saved Monticello. And it's going to be a book about how he and then later his nephew and grandnephew kept it. The anti-Semitism there. I think I haven't seen it, but I imagine we had the author of the book that I believe it's based come and speak a few years ago. So it should
That's
be
in
really,
person. It's in person. We're going to have
it's in
that.
person in the social hall. And we're going to have either, I think the director or the producer is going to speak afterwards.
Right. Yeah, because
And
I know
it's
that's
part of-
part of the film festival as
Yeah, it's
well.
part of the film festival. We cannot do movies in our sanctuary, unfortunately, because the light, unless it's really dark, because you can't cover all of the windows. So it's
Right.
if it's late at night, then you can do it. Karen.
I just looked at the calendar. I'm good for the 13th, so.
Oh, great. So if you
I'm
and
ready for
Stuart,
volunteering. I don't know
all
about.
right, I will send you the script in a little bit. You can
Okay.
decide for yourself if you want to.
decide. No, Stuart can decide for himself. I'm volunteering.
Oh, great. And we're actually
Whatever
using,
he wants to
usually
do is- But I'm volunteering.
this was one written a few years ago by people who were much more into music than me. So they used modern pop music for it, which I do not know. So I had to work really, when I originally did it, I had to watch this horrible video over and over again for hours and hours to figure out how to sing this song. But all the other songs are great. Like what's her name? Taylor Swift, some people like that.
Oh, so I have to sing? Wait, I have to sing?
No, you don't have to, but
Oh,
you
good.
can. If you don't sing, if you want to sing, you sing. If you don't, the musician is going to
Yeah.
sing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
And he's 20 something, so I'm sure he knows Taylor Swift. Her song is actually fun. The one song they made me sing was the only one I did. I think I didn't like it because I had to watch this terrible video about him running, and he just ran the whole video. What's his name? He was one of the Jonas Brothers. He was one of those guys.
Oh, yeah.
And I have nothing against him. So, I mean, it's just the fact that I had to watch the song over and over again. But the
I
Taylor
had
Swift song is a lot of fun. She's a lot of fun. I mean, her song.
I had one that I wrote a number of years ago. All of the music was Ray Charles songs.
Oh, that's great.
Reworded, but
Yeah, we'll send it. We may use that. I was writing one. We had somebody send me one he wrote, but I said, we'll use one that's known. We've got the script completely done. We'll probably edit it down a little bit because it's a little long, and I have a song leader who will recognize each of these songs right away and can play them. So it should be fun. And it could hopefully have no idea how many people, but there'll be free pizza and Lamentations, and I'll be in costume, and we'll have Harry. And if you have your own Harry Potter costume, great. If not, we'll provide it for you.
Okay.
It's basically just if you have like a black cape. Yeah.
Oh, well, I still have my graduation robe from when I got.
Yeah, that would be perfect,
I
actually.
think I still have it anyway.
And then then you'll bring a wand. Have something that you can make into a wand. You can go to the store. I have several Harry Potter wands. I don't know if I want to lend them out because they're really important to me. So thank you guys. All right, you're making my life a lot better now. I appreciate it.
Good.
And I'm talking only to
Bye-bye.
Karen and possibly Stuart at this point. But
I'll
stay
do
safe,
it.
Genevieve. I know if you're interested as well, just letting you know. So you guys have a good one and stay safe. And I will see you next week. I may see some of you on Sunday though at the
See
movie.
some of
Thank
you
you.
tonight, too.
Bye-bye.
Tonight, right? I meant live and in person, but yeah, tonight. virtually.
I know Genevieve's going to be there. I think Michael. No, you're not there tonight.
No.
I can't remember. I've got two
And
lists.
it's going to be. Is it going to be? It's recorded though. We can watch it. We can't make it tonight. Yeah, that's what I talked to you about.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
So I will watch it, and you guys stay safe.
Okay. Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.